Aerith, a mysterious yet beautiful flower. Final Fantasy VII, heralded by millions today as one of the greatest video games ever made. There is just no describing how potent this game is. No way to truly express the sheer impact it's had on the landscape of video games and culture, and how this game single-handedly transformed the art of storytelling and gaming forever. This video is intended to be an exploration of the hidden spirituality within Final Fantasy VII, but to make it accessible for people who might not have heard of it, allow me to provide an incredibly brief overview of the plot. Fair warning, this will basically spoil everything. The game begins as a humble story of an ex-soldier named Cloud Strife, whose disposition towards the world gets him a job as a mercenary running a bombing run of a large reactor within a giant city which is literally draining the planet's life force energy. The city is owned and operated by the Shinra Corporation, using the energy to fuel the city, make bank, and support the evil corporatocracy in generally ruling the world. Cloud doesn't really care about any of that stuff though. He just wants to get paid. Joining Cloud in his adventures at first are Paert, the gun-armed leader of the rebel faction called Avalanche trying to destroy Shinra, Cloud's old friend Tifa, who just kicks ass, and Aerith, a mysterious yet beautiful flower girl who is later revealed to be the last living descendant of an ancient race of super spiritual humans called the Cetra. Over the course of the game, fighting the corporatocracy, it is revealed that there is a deeper, more significant evil in the world. It began a long time ago when a meteor crashed into the planet, which had a parasitic life form on it called Genova, which was responsible for wiping out the ancient Cetra. Later in time, Genova was captured by the corporatocracy and they did bio-experiments with it and created a half-human, half-Genova clone being named Sephiroth. Along the journey, we meet Red 13, a talking wolf with a Charmander tail who introduces us to his grandfather, a floating wise man who reveals to us that the entire planet, whose name is Gaia, is a giant living organism that shares its energy freely with the life forms on the planet. He explains that we're all intimately connected with each other, and that when we die, our soul energy returns to the planet and becomes one with the energy called the life stream, whereby after which we can return again in another body and live out more lifetimes as the great energy naturally flows through us to do so. Meanwhile, we also discover that Sephiroth over his life has come to awaken the Genova DNA within him and recognizes himself as Genova's child and fuels this evil Jesus complex within him. He sets out on a mission to use magic to summon another meteor to crash into the planet, which will release a massive amount of life stream energy, then to be absorbed by Genova and fuse Genova's consciousness with the planet. So the goal of the villain of FF7 is basically to become the villain from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Genova would become a planet and then can create anything that it wishes, master of the evil reality matrix. Part of the journey to make this happen involves going into this ancient pyramid with a mind-bending reality labyrinth inside, and we'll talk more about this later. As mentioned, we also learn of the Cetra, the ancient super spiritual civilization that once thrived on the planet and who had the ability to communicate with the planet itself, but have all but disappeared, leaving behind only a few remnants of its civilization and Aerith, a mystical girl with magical healing powers, who is instrumental in saving the day at the end through the power of prayer and a deep, intimate connection with nature and the Holy Spirit. No joke. There are legends of the ancient Cetra homeland called the Promised Land, a place where the life stream energy flows like milk and honey, and this fuels the plot because the Shinra Corporation are looking for it so that they can extract more energy because their other wells are drying up. At one point, in what is perhaps one of the most legendary turning points in a video game ever, Aerith leaves the party and goes to the Forgotten City, a particularly magical city of the ancient Cetra, where she is found in deep mystic prayer. Moments later, Sephiroth descends from above and kills her, creating a huge turning point for the game and the emotional well-being of the characters. Cloud too goes on a journey of self-discovery through this game, as he first discovers that he is not even himself, but that his memories were a clone of another soldier named Zack, who had black hair and a really big sword. But through the reconciliation of this inner paradox of, who am I? It helps him to realize who he truly is and ultimately leads him to courageously confront Sephiroth at the end of the game. The game ends with the colossal meteor that Sephiroth has summoned coming to smash the planet. But thanks to Aerith's sacred prayer just before she died, she was able to summon the life stream to awaken to the threat and stop the giant space rock from smashing into the planet. And of course, Cloud and his friends beat Sephiroth. After the credits, we see the world many, many years later and find that new life has taken over the old Shinra city and is now covered in moss and plant life. So, off the bat, let me just ask, did you notice any hidden spirituality in this game? Literally every aspect of this story we could probably go deeper into. The Shinra Corporation personifies the current economic and business systems of the world, draining the planet of her life force through the extraction of her natural resources with reckless abandon. We see references to an ancient civilization that thrived in connection with the planet. Today in our world, we see scientists and historians are now beginning to acknowledge sites like Göbekli Tepe, and that there must have been some ancient civilization of some kind on this planet over 13,000 years ago. We even see a deep psychological reference to exploring our true nature with the spirit of the planet when Cloud falls into the life stream. But yet, with a game like FF7, the real hidden spirituality goes way deeper through its unique reflection of Kabbalistic wisdom. Just as a side note, if this next bit doesn't make total sense, go and check out our Spirit Science Tree of Life series afterwards and then come back. It'll blow your mind 1,000 times more. The first clue we see to this is through the name of the main villain, Sephiroth. In the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, each sphere is called a Sephirot, the exact same spelling and everything. We see further connections to the Tree of Life with the characters Aerith, Paert, and Tifa, some of the initial characters we meet in the game. Aerith connects to Chesed, which stands for the archetypes of love, grace, and benevolence. Paert opposes her with Gevura, the force of power and purposeful destruction in order to refine the creative process. It makes sense because he's the one who organizes the bombing run on the reactors that are draining the life stream for profits. Then we have Tifa, whose name relates with Tiferet and stands for the harmony and goodness of the spirit of humanity. This is only scratching the surface though, because it seems nearly everyone has some sort of spiritual or religious reference. Even Hojo, the evil scientist who basically created evil Jesus, has a mutated form later called Helitic Hojo, a misromanization of Heretic Hojo, referring to heresy, a concept in many religions about going against the norm of their belief system. But on top of this, FF7 goes even deeper. You see, there is an idea that comes from ancient Gnosticism and Kabbalistic lore about the creation of the universe. Essentially, it's the idea that the supreme oneness created this first layer of creation, a dimension called an aeon, which had supreme knowing and understanding from the wisdom of the Godhead. Creation then extended further, creating more dimensional aeons, but which had less knowing and connection to the supreme source. Eventually, an aeon was created that was entirely disconnected from even knowing that there was anything higher, which the Gnostic called the demiurge. It thought that it was the supreme all-powerful benevolence, and this demiurge was what created the universe and inhabited it with all of life. However, the powers that it used were still from the supreme oneness, and so the seeds of benevolence and goodness were hidden within the created life on the planet. Now, Final Fantasy VII demonstrates this story in several ways. The first is that it describes how some people can choose a life of goodness and striving, and others walk a path of evil and corruption. It also shows that sometimes pain and conflict are thrust upon us, and we must transmute and transform the energy within us if we are to become who we are born to be. This is why Cloud's last name is Strife. It is through his strife that he both finds himself and saves the world. But the true hidden spirituality here is this. Regarding the story of the demiurge, we actually see it told through Jenova. The name here, Jenova, is not at all dissimilar from the Jewish Jehovah, their name for God fused with the Greek Nova, meaning new, essentially giving Jenova a name that means new God. Final Fantasy VII here uses this name as a commentary on the way that God was described in the Old Testament. It said that God is a jealous God with a number of other very humanly qualities. The game here presents the idea of the false God, the demiurge, pretending to be the supreme oneness, which it cannot be. This goes further with the relationship to Sephiroth, giving us an idea of a sort of evil Jesus figure. He is, for all intents and purposes, the Son of God and the Word of God made manifest in a human body and performs, well, evil miracles. For example, where Jesus brought Lazarus back from the dead, Sephiroth killed Aerith so hard that no amount of Phoenix Downs could ever bring her back to life. I'm sorry, I need a sec. It's just so sad. By the way, Cloud, how is it you're standing here? when this shot plays immediately after. I mean, where are your feet, bro? Anyways, here's a few other cool things. The game features the use of magic through crystals called materia, and materia is both Spanish and Latin for matter and material. There are 7 types of materia, which sort of correspond to the chakras, but it's more likely that they were designed based on the 5 elements, and then the forces of good and evil beyond the elements. The red materia used for summons is notably interesting. Summons are spells cast in battle that allow you to draw upon some deity to come and assist you in some way. But what's amazing is that almost every single summon is based on a mythological god in history. And then there's the one for the giant chickens. I won't go through all of them, but here's a few key ones. There is Shiva and Rama, relating to the Hindu gods of the same name. We have Ifrit from Islamic mythology, Odin from the Norse mythology. We have Hades from Greek mythology, and Knights of the Round, who is by and far the most powerful summon and is literally King Arthur and his 12 knights coming to your rescue and kicking some ass. In addition to the main 5 materia that are usable by the player, there are also 2 more types, white and black materia. The black materia is the force of chaos for destroying anything and everything you want. In the game, it's used to summon meteor to smash into the planet. The white materia is called holy, a force of divine sacred benevolence, which can be used to cleanse the planet of threats. I guess I should mention there's also huge materia, which is kind of like giant chunks of unrefined crystal matter. Now, earlier in this video, I mentioned that there was this ancient pyramid. You might remember in the Spirit Science Human History movie, we talked about how there's this story about the true capstone of the Great Pyramid in Egypt being sealed away somewhere deep underground beneath the pyramid itself in a secret chamber, and that the little capstone is a perfect image of the Great Pyramid made of solid gold with little passageways and everything. This idea was encoded into FF7 because when you make it to the end of the labyrinth inside of the pyramid, you enter into the secret chamber and literally find a tiny version of the whole pyramid that you're standing inside. What's more amazing is that as your character goes to take it, the Great Pyramid around you begins to shake and tremble. If you remove it, you get the MacGuffin, but the pyramid will collapse upon you. Oh noes. Anyway, one of the most valuable aspects of the game is that it not only loads us up on hidden spiritual symbolism, but it grabs us emotionally too, which is why the game has weaved such tight emotional memories with nearly everyone who's ever played it. We see all of the characters get very existential throughout the game, dealing with death in their own ways, dealing with isolation, pain, loss, sadness, and struggle against their seemingly inevitable demise. And remember, all of these characters exist within us as we play. And so as you progress throughout the game, you are put in the driver's seat of experiencing those emotional states yourself. You become the characters, and the struggle is real within you, and you grow and evolve with them. Many people who began playing FF7 might have connected with Cloud, not really caring about the world or that the planet is dying, whatever, you know? But by the end, you see the bigger picture. You see the necessity for changing the world. And maybe, just maybe, you embody your own inner Team Avalanche, your own inner Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, or Red 13, and set out on a quest to save the world. But maybe just don't blow up anything. I'm certain we can find a better way to move humanity forward. Anyway, Final Fantasy VII will stand forever in the hearts and minds of millions around the world as a testament to gaming and storytelling. And for those who are able to see deeper into the fabric of the reality matrix, it stands as an encoded language of ancient mysticism that speaks to the human soul about the nature of life, love, and our connection to the world. The game asks us if we're willing to stand for what we believe in. Are we willing to go inside ourselves and do the inner work to discover who we really are? Are we willing to look deeper past the surface level of a story, any story, and find the hidden spirituality? Thank you again.
What if this world and everything we think about reality turned out to be very different to what we believe it to be? It's a question that very much upsets a lot of people. The evidence that I discussed recently of ancient technology, free energy devices, the fact that it seems that free energy was very readily available a couple of centuries ago anyway. I find all of this stuff incredibly interesting and intriguing, looking into the concept of ancient technology and technology that's very different from the technology we use now, such as sound frequency technology. I've seen a lot of reports recently talking about the organs, the old pipe organs, and what these were really used for, whether they were in fact instruments that were used to create sound frequency that we used for healing. And this may sound preposterous to a lot of people, but these pipe organs in these cities and these small towns, it seems like every town has one as well. I've even got reports from little villages in Mexico that don't have very much there. They've got dirt roads and all sorts of stuff, but there'll be a church in the town which has a huge pipe organ. They don't really know where it came from, but it's there. And the question is, what was the real purpose of these instruments? Were they merely for creating music, or was it really a sound healing system that they had? And Royal Raymond Rife was a man who found a way to cure all diseases way back in the 20s or 30s. I think it was in the 1930s or the 1940s they actually had a banquet to celebrate the end of all disease due to the research and techniques that had been uncovered by Royal Raymond Rife, and he was curing incurable diseases, and he did it through sound frequency. He was able to identify viruses, live viruses in the body. He could view them with this microscope that he built. The Rife microscope was an absolutely incredible device which gave him the ability to be able to view viruses in real time. And what he would do, he would put a blood sample under the microscope, and he would look at your blood sample, and he would subject the sample to a series of light frequencies. Because every light you apply, when you go through frequencies of light and you put them on an object, different frequencies of light will illuminate different aspects of the object. Like if you put frequencies of light on a blood slide, different organisms or viruses or bacteria in the blood will become illuminated under certain lights. And Rife figured out that all you have to do is go through the light frequency until you find the light that illuminates the virus, and then find the corresponding sound frequency, bombard the virus with that sound frequency, and it will shatter like a crystal glass shatters on high C when an opera singer hits. It's the same thing, it's the same principle. All you have to do is find the corresponding sound frequency, and you will create a feedback loop which will shatter the virus. All of this sort of stuff quite intriguing and quite fascinating. And the concept that we had this ancient technology is really not so far-fetched. And when you think about it and you really consider the possibility that this technology has been stolen from us, it really does provide a whole new perspective to look at things from. And you think about these huge pipe organs in these churches, folks. Who built these things? I mean, these things are amazing, the construction of them. Some of them are absolutely huge. Who figured out the frequencies and who got it all that perfect? Who tuned it? And imagine the sound field that it would set up if you went through the entire keyboard and you created that level of sound. I mean, these things are incredibly loud. You could literally cover the entire village in a sound frequency. What if people went to these church buildings and they actually sat in the organ music, and the organ music healed them of all of the bacteria in their body every week when they went to these churches? Perhaps the churches were not places of worship, perhaps they were places of healing. Just a thought. Look at the detail of these organs, look at the detail that went into the construction of them, the meticulous workmanship of them. Look at the detail that went into the construction of a lot of these buildings. Like I said last week, and like I've said quite often recently, a lot of these buildings look more like machines than actual buildings. They look like they're buildings that actually perform a function, which isn't just an aesthetic function of looking good or being a place to pray in. They very much look like they are able to accumulate and harness and use energy in a way that we are unaware of. And when you begin to consider these type of things, even if you don't want to believe them, just considering them, it does open up a whole new train of thought for people. And if you can really consider this type of technology being a reality, then look at the type of technology we use now. Look at the 5G system. Look at all of this digital stuff that we're doing, which is so different to this analog technology that we were using. Anybody who knows the human vessel and understands humanity understands the difference between analog and digital and how it affects us on an emotional and on an energetic level. I mean, it does. I mean, we're very much analog in everything we do, and even that is not the probably correct way to say it, but the whole digital realm that we're being led into now, it's completely the opposite of any of this ancient type of technology they're using. Even the explosive type of electricity that we create through burning coal and all the things that we do to create electricity, if there was a way to simply do it through harmonizing with the ether around us, it would seem to be far more beneficial. I mean, just think about it, folks. We're made of energy. The static electricity that is around everywhere is part of us. It's part of everything. If you're a kid, you probably had a crystal set when you were a kid, a crystal radio set. I had one when I was a child. You just combine these crystals and they harvest energy from the field, and bang, you've got electricity, you've got a radio. So why do you need to have these big coal-fired power stations? If you had crystals and copper and metal and wires and put it in the right configuration, why would you not be able to harvest energy from the field? I mean, if you can do it with a crystal radio set, why can't you do it with a huge building and create an energy field which is going to work for everybody? Makes sense to me. It's just that a lot of people aren't prepared to think that way. They see their crystal radio sets they had as a kid as something novel, but apply it on a bigger scale. Look at what you use to make that crystal radio set. You use crystals, you use copper wire, you used all the things that we find in these buildings. But where does it all lead? All of this type of discussion? That's the question, isn't it? I mean, with the rollout of 5G and all of the stuff that's happening, some people may ask, what is the point of looking down these rabbit holes and discussing what may have happened in the past? Well, the point is that this past is so recent. It's not thousands of years ago, it's just hundreds of years ago. And I've tried so many ways of awakening people. I've pointed out the clear and present danger that we're in. I've pointed out the state of urgency that we're in. I've addressed 9/11. I've addressed the state of Israel. I've addressed the war on terror. I've addressed every single thing I can think of to attempt to awaken people and to empower people. And the concept that we had free energy as little as 150 to 200 years ago and we lived in a completely different society, I find incredibly empowering. And if people can grasp this concept and see how recently it really was, that we were very likely in much freer societies than we are now, it may inspire them to want to get back to that. We've got remnants of this culture still here all over the earth, these big copper top buildings, these big churches, these spires, all these things that we can't build now. Even the pipe organs that I was talking about before, I mean, you go and find someone who can go and build one of these pipe organs for you. See if you can find someone. See if you can find a church that's even using one of these pipe organs now. Most churches, they may have a pipe organ in there, but it's rarely used. And if it is used, it's just used to play hymns. You think they would really go to all the trouble of constructing an organ of this size and shape and magnitude of some of the ones that you see in these old churches and just use them for playing tunes behind hymns on Sundays? Do you really think they would go to all that effort just to do that? It seems pretty incongruous to me. But I don't know, I find all of this type of information really empowering. Perhaps it will inspire people to actually shake the sleep from their eyes, because that's really what it's like. It's like people are walking around in a daze. All of this technology exists all around them. All of this old world, a lot of the old world still exists all around them, but they're simply not seeing it because they can't see outside of the social construct that they have in their minds. They can't see beyond the history that they've been told, the history they've been taught, the world that they've been indoctrinated into believing is real. A lot of people, when they look at society, they just view it economically. They don't view it from a human perspective. But our society should be there to support life. That should be first and foremost the absolute mandate of anything that we construct to have people living in. Any cities should be designed to support life. We don't need cities that are designed the way they are, that are designed to run economically and that are based on profit. Medical systems that are based on profit, energy systems that are based on profit. Everything is based on profit. It's this introduction of money and thus scarcity over the human experience which creates all of this substandard culture that we've got, all these substandard products. It removes us of everything that it means to be human by imposing this economic model over people. That's what it's been for. That's what it's been designed to do. And that's why we can never escape this system until we put all of that thinking down. If people still think economically, if people still think that this society is normal, that it should function this way, that we need to do the things that we're doing, then there's no hope for us. If we're going to continue to support these cities that we live in, which are designed to separate people and to make them completely dependent upon the system. You can't grow your own food, you can't ever survive on your own in a city. It's a jungle, and it's designed to be that way, both physically and mentally. Everything about the cities is jungle mentality. Survival of the fittest, only the things that you need for you to survive are not there. Unless you can exploit someone else and get the paper you need to pay to be alive to go and buy these things from some establishment, there's nothing there in your environment that you can actually use to create a life for yourself. It's all economically based. It's simply not the natural habitat of humans. Humans shouldn't be living in these cities. They don't serve us in any way, shape or form.
You see, it was an established fact that the regal class of Negro nomads exiled from the kingdom of Judah, that they resided